You were living in Toronto.
Yes.
And you went to visit family in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
And you didn't go home as soon as you expected.
No, I didn't.
Because why?
So it started like this. I was on my way for an internship with UNICEF in Nepal. And the day I landed, I did make it home. I saw my parents. I had lunch and dinner. And I don't know, for a lot of people listening, they don't know what Ramadan is. Ramadan is a 30-day fasting period for Muslims. So it was during Ramadan. And
If you don't know what Ramadan is, you better go travel more.
Yeah. Or, contact your neighbor. But so we finished iftar, which is like the evening meal where you break fast. And then I was seeing this girl at the time. And then we were going to go meet at a restaurant, which happened to be in one of the diplomatic zones in Bangladesh, like in Dhaka, which is the capital city of Bangladesh. And yeah, we were there. We were enjoying some ice cream. And to come back to why I didn't make it home as early as I thought I would, we heard some loud noises. And at the time, I looked at my then partner, and then we thought it was because it was close to Eid, which is the festival that comes at the end of Ramadan, which is like a Christmas equivalent, right? And then we heard those loud noises, and we thought it was probably fireworks, right? And that's the first thing that you think, July 4th, right? You hear things. I used to live in Harlem, and when I used to hear fireworks, I used to think they're gunshots, right? But they're not. But in this case, we turn around, and all of a sudden, some people rush in with AK-47s, and the whole cliche that you would think that surrounds a terrorist attack. And we realize in a very few brief yet contemplating seconds that we're in the middle of something that we never imagined, right? People are in trouble right now. And it's a terrorist attack.
And you're in an ice cream shop.
Yeah, it's a cafe with a small ice cream shop, and we're sitting right by the water. There was like a patio, like a gazebo type. And we're just sitting there, and they rush in through like the main entrance to this place, and there's like a big lawn. It was a beautiful place.
It's like a nicer area?
It is a nicer area. It's in the diplomatic area in Dhaka.
And how many terrorists bombard the
So,
cafe?
I mean, at that time, it seemed like there were 1,000, but eventually we find out that there's 5 of them. It seemed like way more than that when they were, because you just like, it's like a barrage of like gunshots and loud noises. And like for someone like I used to live in Canada and Bangladesh, like you're not used to, I mean, for Americans, it might be a little different. You're not used to hearing gunshots. So you don't know how loud it is. So when like an AK-47 goes off, you know how loud it is. And it's like it seemed like it was all around us.
Are they firing into the air?
I don't know what they were doing, but they were eventually firing at people.
Wow.
Yeah. And so many innocent people lost their lives right at that point, because what they came in was with a purpose of harming and eventually, I guess, killing people who were not of the Muslim faith.
What do you remember as your first thoughts once they bombarded the cafe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think about that a lot because, that's like a turning point in your brain of what's happening. But my first thought was, what am I going to tell my mom?
She's how far away from this cafe?
She is like, we live about so it was like a 30-minute drive, but in Bangladesh with the traffic, it means like it's an hour and a half drive. But she's there, and one of my cousins dropped me to that cafe. And while my mom knew I was dating the girl at the time, she didn't know I was out to meet her.
Oh, busted.
So I'm like, oh my God. My first thought was, what's my parents gonna say? Like, even if I get out of here.
Dude, you got AK-47s in your face and you're thinking about that?
Yeah. Because,
you're a good son.
Yeah. Because if my mom whoops my ass, it's probably gonna be much worse.
It's like terrorist or mom? And he's worried about mom.
Well, I was worried about mom.
Hey, shout out to your mom then.
Yeah. She's an amazing woman. Oh, I miss you.
We love you. We love you, mom.
Yeah, we love you, mom. So I mean, that was of course the initial thought, but then you face reality, right? And reality comes at you and breaks your perception of what you think is normal or how you contextualize life in a second. And without, I guess, me ever being in that situation, I wouldn't have ever realized that life can literally turn in a second, generally for the worse, right? Because good things come in small packages, or good things come as you wait, but bad things can happen pretty swiftly. And when that realization hit that, oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to get out of here alive. And one of my first reactions, and this is another thing which I always guess was profound for me, is how your brain, your amygdala, has sort of a reflex, and it's unconscious and it's unbiased, and it can have certain reactions that you wouldn't know it's there. It's a manifestation of fight or flight, or even it might be a manifestation of how you are raised in terms of values. And I know it's pretty disconnected, but let me tell you why. Because my first reaction, and I've only seen this in movies, was there was a table. I kicked the table in front of us because there's like, of course, there's like bullets spraying around. I put it head first towards where the people are rushing in from. And I put my friends behind me as if I'm protecting them. But that's not what I would have thought that I would have done. But I guess what I said, like unconsciously, you just do things in situations which I guess you're not prepared for, and yet your brain acts in a certain way. Another fun fact, not a fun fact at all, but I had my wallet, and my wallet had my Canadian debit card, credit card, IDs, and my phone, of course. And my phone has, photos of me being in Canada. I don't know how, but of course I see like they're screaming things at the top of their voice, and there's horrible things happening right in front of my eyes. I just throw all of that away. I just take it out of my pocket. I had a pack of cigarettes with me. Don't smoke. But I had a pack of cigarettes with me, and I just threw all of that away unconsciously. And you know what? That probably saved my life. Because at one point, when they come back, and the first thing they say is, "Are you Muslims?" And we're like, "Yes, of course." And that's the first thing anyone would say, right? And then they're like, "Okay, you're fine. You're fine." But eventually, they did check our IDs. And when they asked me, where's your ID or where's your wallet? I said, I must have lost it. So even if I was, of course, like, because I was Muslim, maybe I wouldn't have, or I would have survived. I don't know. But the fact that I was Canadian, I wasn't a Canadian citizen at the time, but the fact that I had Canadian IDs would just prompt them the other way. And I don't know why I did that still. And I had money there. I wish. I wish. And I had a hard time getting all those IDs and those debit cards and credit cards back. But you know what? Maybe that saved my life that day. I don't know. I'm alive right now, so perhaps it is what it is. But, as I said, like the actions that you take or how your brain reacts to a certain situation is unpredictable, and it can have very, very positive consequences.
So how quickly between the time they bust into the doors and start firing shots until they're actually talking to you?
Yeah. Probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
What were they like?
They were young, which is young, and some of them were actually educated. Like they spoke in like pretty fluent English, like how I'm speaking with you. And I think that caught us off guard because generally, again, the cliche that you think, and especially this being in Bangladesh, right? You think like this is the regular cliche, someone who's uneducated and brainwashed. But this was someone who was speaking, at least one or two of them were speaking the way we were. Some of them weren't, and they were young. And, that's just...
What do you mean by young?
By young, I was 22 at the time. 2016, yeah, I was 22 at the time. And we later find out that they were my age and two of them were younger than me. Yeah.
So are you trying to like, this sounds crazy, but like befriend these people? Are you like,
yes, absolutely.
fuck you guys, like I gotta get out of here as quickly as possible?
I mean,
what becomes your goal?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I thought about at one point, all of us like just thought about like just darting across the lawn and but they probably would have shot us, right? So that wasn't an option. The only option we had was speaking to them. And that's when I think I started talking to them. And I took every chance I could get to talk to them. Because at the end of the day, if you can talk, you can understand. And that gives you a little bit of chance to maybe put some sense into their heads, or just, say something through which your circumstances might change, right? And that's the best you can do in a survival situation. Because without understanding what aspect they're coming from, without them having empathy towards you, you don't stand a chance, right? And that goes in a business situation, that goes in a sales situation. You've worked in sales. That works in a sales situation is that the longer you can keep a person engaged, the better chances you have of convincing them. And I think I didn't realize before that, but I think that sort of sets certain philosophy in my life, which is communication, right? You talk to someone, you explain, you enhance their understanding of what you are and what position you're coming from, and you stand a chance.
Dude, the fact that you can be held at hostage at gunpoint by terrorists in Bangladesh and be thinking about your values of empathy and communication speaks volumes to you as a human.
I mean, it's hard to quantify values, especially when you're in a situation like that. But I think what anyone and everyone should constantly be thinking of is reaching, right? Whether that person agrees with you or not. Like, you see the political turmoil that's going on in the world, and we can easily say, yeah, world peace, or, why can't we just be in a forum? But it's much harder. It's much easier said than done. And in those situations, if people, whether consciously or unconsciously, are thinking how they can come together, it's not necessarily sitting at a table, but making those compensations, making those, those small gestures helps you overcome that space. And yeah, maybe those are values, maybe that's just reflexes, or maybe that's just my mind telling me this is exactly what you have to do to survive this freaking night.
Dude, at 22 years old.
At 22 years
old.
old.
So what unfolds the rest of that evening?
We get taken in at that time.
Taken in where?
Taken into the restaurant, because mind you,
You're in the gazebo.
Were in the gazebo, right? We get taken in and we see there's other hostages there.
How many?
The table that we went to, there were 5 other people. And then there were some other people there. But by the time we get taken in, there's already a lot of people who've lost their lives.
And are they just...
They're there.
They're just laying on the floor?
They're there.
Oh, I'm sorry, man.
Yeah. And I think one of the, the biggest things that you hold on is, when people think about the last moments of their life, right? Or when you think about people that you love and you think about the last moments of their life, we got to witness the last moments of these people's lives, these innocent people's lives. And it's just something that you have to live with, right? Because you were there and to constantly feel like they deserved better. A lot of them came to Bangladesh to work, and they were helping, infrastructure projects, and they were working with nonprofits. And these were normal, everyday people who, again, did not expect that to happen, just like I didn't, but I just got lucky. I don't know what I did to deserve it, or anyone. And I don't think it's even a matter of who deserves it or not, but what happened was, a result of unfortunate things and harmful ideologies that led to people losing their lives, and mine being overturned for the rest of my life.
How does that manifest? Like, when you're that close to death, some people die, you fall on the other line, you survive.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah, and I contemplate that all the time. I think, and I didn't just get lucky in the sense that I survived and I had enough time to contemplate. And I study statistics, right? I studied epidemiology. And even before that, like I loved stats. I'm not very good at it. My grades aren't that great. But I
But
love
you did go to Columbia.
I did go to Columbia, yeah, but I think my story helped me get in. That was a great essay. It was also a combination of, I guess, like work experiences and life experience. But regardless, coming back into the topic, I study stats and I pondered, not on that night, but I pondered later on my chances of surviving. And I think I could count 16 instances that night that I could have died and I didn't. And yes, you asked about how is it like at the cusp of life and death. And maybe you survive for a reason, whether you believe in a higher power, whether you don't. I believe that I got a chance, whether it was intentionally done by someone else or not. But when you're at the edge of between death and living, you want to steer the rest of your life in a way that reality, before you hit that reality, because death is an eventual reality for everyone, and for us who've seen that, that fine line, that you can always cross that line at any second of your life. Like even while we're having this conversation, something might happen, a meteor might hit, one of these lights can fall off, and you can die. Right? You can die at any second out of anything, whether it be fate or God or however you want to conceptualize it. What you come back to is what you do with the hours and the seconds that you have, and how you make that meaningful. Some people like meaningful experiences. Some people like to help others. Some people want to go and have a good time. And I think what I've come out of it is I'm not going to judge how people use that limited time in their life.
Yes.
Just don't do harm to others.
Yes.
Just don't do harm to others.
I'm such a fan of thinking about death because I think it's actually a really healthy reality check.
Yeah.
Every decision that I try to make is, what decision will I be happiest with on my deathbed?
Right.
Because at that moment, it just brings everything into clarity.
Right.
Right. And you just suddenly are like, that's a decision I have to make.
Exactly.
Even if it's the hard one in the moment, it's a decision I'll be proudest of on my deathbed.
Right. And it's decisions and it's experiences. And I've recently started like revaluing how I've been living life. I think coming back out of that experience, there were years which I took to sort of understand how I'm going to process the next bit of life or what I'm going to do with that life. And I've been working towards that, and we'll touch on some of that if we have the time left, because I feel like I'm so engaged in this conversation right now, right?
Thank you, man. It means the world that you're sharing this. I'm sure it's not easy to like go back to that night.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you being open and being willing to go there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it takes me in a certain direction. Absolutely. And I send myself into that space, because if I'm not reflecting on it constantly, then I'm not reflecting on my values. Then I'm not reflecting on that second chance that I got, or 16th chance that I got in life.
Yes.
That I have to constantly reflect on it. But when you're on your deathbed, it's about how have you spent that time? Have you, as you said, have you made the right decisions that you're proud of? And have you spent the right time with the people you value? And that for some people, that's family. For some people, that's a friend. For some people, it's a significant other. Or for some people, it might be this random person you met on the street and you've had a fascinating conversation with them. Or someone who doesn't have a ticket to get on a subway and you help them, and that smile you get back. Those are the things that you're going to reflect on your deathbed, right? So I think unless you have a horrible memory or you're dying with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, your life will be reflected on those positive experiences and some negative experiences, but how those negative experiences have shaped you.
So when you're sitting at the table and the people that are next to you, are you talking to them?
No. You're in a hostage situation, man.
You're not talking.
You're not talking. Everyone's like bawling, and we don't know what's happening. You're inside in a very dimly lit room with, of course, like so many people dead and living around you, and with these people with machetes and guns and grenades.
Did you think that people were coming to rescue you?
So you could, by the time they took us inside, you could hear like sirens going outside, and like you knew like the whole like military apparatus of the country was there trying to save you. So we knew there were people outside, but as the night dragged on, and I think they tried to even like negotiate, but as the night dragged on, you know, hope started fading because those sounds became quieter. You knew everyone was there. You knew the country was watching. You knew the world was watching, right? But it just like dimmed and dimmed and dimmed, and like hope started fading away. But when hope fades away, irrationality kicks in, and my irrationality was trying to talk to them. And I talked to them. Of course, like at one point, like one of the people from the table looked at me and just gave me this look like, I was like, hey, I didn't say it, of course, but like in my mind, I'm like, hey, I appreciate this, but these might be the last moments of my life. So I got to try whatever I got to try. And we talked about what their ideologies were, not really about who they were, but like what they were trying to achieve. And, you know, like we're normal people, and what kind of like religious teachings brought them here. If we shared the same religious teachings, then why are we doing this? A lot of it was risky because at any point, this person, this guy can just like flip but I had to try.
It's so brave.
And I tried. And I don't know if it was brave or stupid. I mean, stupidity is sort of, you know, a hallmark of bravery. But I tried. But at the end of the day, you also realize the person holding the gun and the person who's begging for their life are all humans. And I think one thing all humans share is interaction. Whether it be, you think of Neanderthals or you think of early humans, we always interacted. There's an interesting theory about human evolution. It's that human interaction, especially speech, started around fire. Because when early humans used to sit around fire, they used to interact much more than they would when they would go hunting. So those interactions laid foundation for languages. And if you think about the animal kingdom versus humans, they have communication, right? All animals have communication of some sort. But humans developed a structure which is unique in different parts of the world. And as you know, humans moved out of Africa, the way that language developed is a very unique human trait, which eventually led to humans being more interactive, and then eventually becoming. And that's how that theory goes, is that those interactions around the fire are what made humans interact in a way that they could form complex societies. So as a species, we've always shared different modalities of communication, whether it be sign language, body language, conversations, physical touch, different modalities of communication that at the end of the day breaks everything down and reduces itself, reduces the whole entity of being between two or more people. So I think when I was there, at the end of the day, I realized that this is a human, even if that other person is in a position of power. That night itself was complex and complicated. And eventually, at a certain point of the night, they were making different hostages do different tasks. I was there with another gentleman who was there with his family. And at one point, and this was more towards the morning, they ask us and they tell us to get up. And we're like, come with us. We're like, okay, they're going to make us do a chore. But they point to the stairs and they point to the roof. And as we were walking towards the roof, we look back. I look at my friends. He looks at his family. And I could see the fear in their eyes. Because at this point, we're thinking, God. I mean, when I looked at my friends, I was like, oh, I might just be killed right now. And they take us to the stairs. And mind you, maybe this was a fault of me trying to talk. He hands me an empty gun. Empty, I realized later, but he hands me a gun. Take it. And the first thought at the time is, he's gonna make me shoot someone. I'm like, this is not like I'd rather die right now than like have any of this happen, right? And then he takes the gun, pulls the trigger. It's like clocks. I don't know a lot about guns, but shows that it's empty, and then he to take it, and I'm like, nah. And bhaiya in Bangla means brother. Like, nah, bhaiya, I can't. And he's like, take it, and he pulls his AK-47, and I'm like, all right. And I hold it, and both of us don't know what we have to do. And then he opens the door to the roof, and I mentioned this part about the roof all the time when I'm speaking somewhere, because I think that was a pivotal moment of my life, and I'll come to that in a second. Is he tells us to walk out, but listen to this. He first tells me to walk out. Someone who looks like them, happens to have a beard as well, their age similar. Walk out. Then he tells the other guy who's there with me to walk out. And then he walks out. It's in a clear formation. The reason he asked me to walk out at first, because of course, as he said, like, were there people around? There was the whole Bangladeshi defense forces, Air Force, Navy, I don't know, like everyone's there, and there's snipers all around. So when I walked out with a gun to see if anyone shot me, and they didn't shoot me, they sent the other person out who's unarmed to see if they shot him. And when they didn't shoot him, it was safe for the guy there to walk out. Side story, and this I found out later, because when we eventually got released, one of the police officers came to me and said, I had a target on your back. And I asked my supervisor, or like leader or commander, whatever, who was their superior, that shoot or stand by. And whoever was that leader, because they were downstairs and like my parents were outside.
Your parents were there?
My parents, by that time, like, of course they knew. My parents were outside, and this is like towards the morning, right? So by that time, my dad was there. My dad and my aunt was there. My mom stayed at home. And he was carrying around a photo of me, which he didn't even have. He found someone there who happened to go to the same university as my brother did. And he found me on Facebook and gave that photo to my dad. And my dad was desperately walking around there with a photo of me and showed it to one of the police officers and said, this is my son. He's inside, right? And that police officer had seen me, and whoever was that commander. So when that person said shoot or kill, when he asked, it happened to be one of the people who saw my photos, and they said hold, and I didn't get shot.
God bless your dad.
Yeah. And of course, like I like, when something happens to you, it happens to you. But when something happens to your kids, like, I don't have kids, but I can't even imagine what that feels like. Mm-hmm. Right? They say like one of the toughest things to go through is losing your parents, and what's tougher is losing your kids, because you bring them into the world to protect them, right? And if you can't protect them, that's the biggest disappointment in life. So I don't know what was going through my parents, and I don't want to know, and I hope that doesn't happen to any parent in the world. But it does, unfortunately. That's how the world is. That very moment could have, again, I said one out of 16, right? That's one of the 16 times I could have died. And then once we're out there and no one shoots, that guy calms down. But the reason why I say this part of the story all the time, and I emphasize on it, because that part of the story changed my life forever. Because we were photographed on the roof. And if you Google me, or like, if you look at a lot of the publications or whatever that came out at the time, those photos were released. I don't know who took those photos, if it was like security or someone. Those photos were released without context. And when you see those photos, you see me holding a gun. What do you think? That this person is a terrorist. And that has since not only changed my life, but you survive something like that and you think, you know, you get a second chance in life and you want to do good, but then you also have to constantly battle people who will always hold that sentiment against you, who will always think, regardless of the evidence, regardless of the good work that you do, regardless of people coming out and saying he was with me the night before or how he was, who he was, you know, it doesn't matter to them because they saw what they saw and they will make up all these, you know, stories around it and they'll always claim that. And that's what hurts me, is because I can never change their minds.
They stripped away your freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I try to do the work that I do and I try to lead my life a certain way. And I try not to think about that every day because there's been so many people who've come and told me that don't think about it. Because if you think about it, you'll always be dragged out. There will always be people who will say a certain thing and you can't change them. And I think I have come to the point where I've stopped trying to battle that because I think my life has moved on. If I was that person, I would have gone back to that person. Like if I really was what they say I am, I wouldn't be, you know, working like a normal person.
A nonprofit founder, a part-time musician, Columbia graduate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I think not.
I think I'm fine, right? I think I'm doing normal things which normal people are doing.
You're a beautiful human being.
Man, I try. And that's the only thing that I can do is like I can, from my end, try to be the person who I am and I want to be and my values, and they can think whatever they want. But I will do the good that I came to do in this world. And I got a second chance and I got to keep doing good. Mm-hmm. And they can think whatever the hell they want. Mm-hmm. And so that was a pivotal point in my life because those photographs, they exist. They're all over the internet. You can Google them. And I shouldn't be speaking publicly about that all the time, but that's one thing that I always speak publicly about because I want people to understand. I don't want people to listen to me and then they Google me and then they see that photo and they're like, oh, he's a buttload of crap.
Right. Well, dude, I think what's interesting about that is going back to freedom, right? They try to rob you of your freaking freedom, which to me, there's like nothing worse.
Yeah.
But I think honesty and the truth always sets you the most free. So you just being very open about it, right? Yeah. That's what's actually you gaining your control and freedom back, which was robbed from you in such a brutal way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know who did it or if someone had that intention or someone just wanted to have a photo sensationalized because it was all over the news the next day, right? And again, communication, right? Being honest, being truthful, I will tell my story. That was the first time I did the TED Talk is when I sort of like, I kept a low profile after that. I kept as low of profile because I care about my parents. I care about their safety. I care about my friends and family who are around me, right?
Oh, were you pretty terrified that the terrorists would go after your family?
I don't know if it's the terrorists or if it's someone else, but I just cared about the safety of them because, you know, after something like that happens to you, it's really, you have to think about every aspect of it.
Oh, you'd be so jaded.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the last thing. Like your every loved ones and everyone around you went through something like that. You don't want them to go through that experience again, right? I can go back through it because I know how to handle it, but they don't. And I don't want them to. So I kept a very low profile. And then it just, you know, a lot of those sentiments, like I thought like 2 years into it, I thought people would shut up because by this time, like there's enough evidence, like I got acquitted of everything. I thought by that time people would understand. And it was naive of me to think people would. But that's when I like did the TED Talk because I was like, I need to share my side of the story because people are saying so much. People have said so much. And, you know, it's not like people every day are like thinking about me actively, but like, you know, I can't be a public person because there's always that thought that someone's going to come up and dismantle and discredit the good work that I'm that I've doing, and I don't want like any organization or anyone to suffer just because something happened in my life. So going back, so we're in the roof, and we chat again because I'm like, this is it, now or never. I don't know what's gonna happen. I might be shot and left in that rooftop, right? And you don't know what's happening, right? You don't know which direction life's gonna take you or it's gonna turn. At one point, we ask him like, why are you here? Why are we still alive? And he tells us like, yeah, we didn't kill you because we didn't kill you in the beginning, and we're not here to, take your life. And I'm like, that's great. Then just let us go. Like, and I think I said let us go like 20 times over the night. I was like, great to hear from you. Please let us go.
Good to meet you. I'm going to head out now.
Yeah, just the door's that way.
I got a meeting.
I can see the door. I can just walk out.
Bye-bye.
Bye. That would have been great. But I'm like, if you haven't, killed us by now, and you have a certain mission where you think you're going to be a martyr after you do this and all of that, you don't want our blood in your hands, right? Because if you keep us, that's the eventual reality. So why don't you let us go? And I think that was the first time he listened. And then he's like, let's go downstairs. But I thought like, that's it. That was the last chance. And we're downstairs. And then I come back, at least like my friends and the other person's family, they're relieved that we're back.
Big time.
They don't even know like what's happened to us, right? So we go back and we sit down, and like most of the night we had like our heads down on the table. At one point you start hearing them like gear up or dress up or like do something, and they're like in full armor, like fully clothed and guns ready and whatever. And then they tell us, get up. And we get up, and then they're like, you guys can walk out. And we're like, wow, we can finally get out. And then we walk out one by one. But when we got out, and then we see like, there's like a crowd of people with the police and everyone. We go in, and then my life takes the next turn. Because I was photographed on the roof. And again, I look like them. I'm their age. They think I'm one of them. I'll fast forward a little bit here. But what eventually happens is that we get taken into custody. All of us. Some people are released. Some of them are not. Lucky ones like me are not. There's a whole phase of, derogation, and, you get...
I'd be so nervous in interrogation, I would accidentally lie. I'd be like, I'd say some shit I didn't even mean.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I am shattered right now.
And I have horrible memory, okay? I have horrible memory since I was a kid, and I struggled in school a lot because of that. One of the reasons I studied public health and I didn't go into medicine is because I can't memorize shit. But I think speaking the truth and communicating is that important, because I stuck to one story, which is my story, what I experienced, and it matched with everyone's story. And I think that's what helped me during interrogation, because I was like, I have only one perspective on this. And I helped them. I told them every single detail I could remember, because I knew whatever I tell them is going to help them figure this situation out and possibly help other people who were still stuck inside.
Were your captors in jail at this time too, do you think?
No, the captors died.
Oh.
Because soon after, the commando, like the military went in and they were killed. Why wasn't I there?
And were hostages still inside?
There were some hostages. There were some who were released, and I believe there were some hostages, but not like out in the open, because as the conversation went, as I can relate, is that they didn't want the hostages' blood on their hands. Hostages' blood, not everyone else's. They didn't want the hostages' blood on their hands, so I think they put them in like a bathroom somewhere. This is something that I read later on. Of course, I didn't know, but I read later on from one of the other survivors' accounts, is that they were in a bathroom, and there were some like waiters who were like working there who were in a bathroom. And so when they came in, they of course died like fighting, and those 5 terrorists, they died. But
how did that make you feel?
I didn't know until much later. But eventually when we were like taken in by, the authorities, we learned like they were like killed.
Was that like sadness for you?
Definitely not sadness, but it wasn't rejoice either, because human life is human life.
I mean, I know that's a morbid thought and question.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid question, right? Like, because not a lot of people get to be in a situation where someone who was your captor, someone who basically just ruined your life.
Yes.
Because he didn't have to give me that stupid gun and make me go up there. He could have just not done it, and my life would have been different, or maybe I wouldn't have come out. I don't know. The eventualities are endless, right?
Is that what pisses you off the most about the whole situation? Is the rooftop pictures?
No. What pisses me off about the situation is that innocent people die, right? Let's set the baseline, right? Innocent people are not supposed to die. We're not supposed to die. But if you say personally, if you get over the trauma of seeing people lose their lives and innocent people losing their lives without having a say in it or without being judged for who they are, yes, it pisses me off that he had to do that. And not just for me, also the other person who was with me on the roof. His life also, did not go the right way either, right? We were both in so much trouble after that with the authorities. And then not only just the authorities, because you also think I might be targeted by the same, religious groups later on, right? So you're on one side, you have the authorities. On the other side, you have the terrorists and whoever, believes in the same ideologies they do. And on the other side, there's the general public. Where do you go?
You're like, dude, I just want to go back to Toronto.
I just want to go back to school. At this point, I just wanted to go back to school and lead a normal life. I was heading off to UNICEF thinking that my life would be exciting, working in the mountains. I would be collecting.
Nepal's a wonderful place.
I hear it. I wasn't ever able to make it back there.
I'm going in a couple of weeks.
Send me photos.
You could get rid of.
Send me photos. I won't get off of work. I can go now, but I'll join you there.
So how long are you in the Bangladesh? You call it jail?
Yeah. So I was in and out of how do you say, interrogation, and I don't know the exact what the word is right now. I can't think of the exact word right now. But so that was 1.5 months. And then eventually
1.5 months.
1.5 months.
How are the conditions?
5-star hotel. No. It wasn't the best. Of course it wasn't the best. It was difficult, but I think again, your priorities lie elsewhere at the time. You don't think about your accommodations.
When you wake up in the morning, what's the first thing that hits your mind?
What am I going to have for breakfast? Because breakfast has been shitty all these days. I always want to have a home cooked meal and, sit around a table with people who are not judging me and thinking of something before I take every step. And then when there were good instances, while I was still being interrogated, I think there was a police officer who had a child who had some sort of, I think, either a genetic condition or immunologically compromised. And he was treating his kid at a hospital in India. And what the doctor prescribed was in English. And it was, of course, something medical, and he had to get the medicine in Bangladesh. And of course, a lot of them knew that I was innocent because, they're cops, right? They know someone. They know by a day or two that, all right, this person's whatever. If he was this, he would have been that way. And they handle, the terrorism in the country was a problem for a while, and they deal with that, right? So they know what someone is, how they lead their life, what they say, how many times they pray. There's obvious signs, and there's this kid here, idiot, wants to have a cigarette every once in a while and who's just asking to meet his parents. They know who I am, right? So he knows, and he knows that I studied health, I studied global health. So I understand medical terms. So he asked me, he didn't show me, of course, he's not allowed to show me, but he asked me this is what I was prescribed. And then I told him like, okay, this is a medicine for this condition. You should go to this pharmacy. You can get this. And he did that. And the next day he came back to me and he said, thank you so much. That really helped me. And then I helped him a few more times with his prescriptions. Small acts of kindness, right? It's because we could communicate. And because we could communicate and we could empathize with each other. And that gained me nothing, right? That didn't give me anything. But that gave him a lot. But what it did give me is an understanding, again, that if you can communicate with someone on a human level, you get kindness back, or you get understanding back, or you get some reciprocity. And I got reciprocity back in a very, very difficult situation. A lot of those times I didn't know how my parents were. I don't know if I was ever gonna get out. I didn't know what was happening to my life. I thought I was either gonna be in interrogation forever. I don't know how the justice system works. At least I didn't at the time. I don't know how any of this is gonna work. But that gave me a very, very positive moment that I hold on to. You know, when you were a kid, there's a playground. And when you think about a playground, you associate good memories to it, right? But there were so many times you were hurt and someone bullied you, but you remember good instances of it. And I like to process that moment in my life with the good instances that I got, because if I'm holding on to the death and destruction that I saw, I wouldn't be able to move on from it. And, you know, all the mental health issues that come with it would be a constant.
When did you get hope back?
I think hope comes in the form of sine curve, which is like sine curve goes up and down with the constant being at 0. I had hope from the point I crossed that door out of that bakery, out of that cafe. Because regardless, and I could have died even after that. It's part of the 1 out of 16 that I said. But I think there was a little bit of hope from that, because I know no matter what happened, I'm in the public eye again. And someone's not out here to actively try to kill me. Maybe there was, I don't know. But I think I have a chance. And when I knew I had a chance, I think that's when hope came in. But hope also went away when, like, you know, during interrogation, one day they're like, oh, there's another, and at the time there was another terrorist attack which happened while we were inside. They came to us and they said, no chance. Like, the case that the government wants to give us, of course, going to be much more strict, because they're not gonna be sympathetic to anyone. Like, how? Like, I gave you all the information. Like, they took my laptop, phone, whatever. And honestly, I opened my Facebook and, like, you know, my social media. I gave them my password. I was like, go, look at it. Look at whatever you want in my life. So it was at those times when I was like, you have all the information that you need. The people who were there, they died, and you have an understanding of what all of that was about. Why am I still in this position? Why am I? And I broke down. And I think there were few instances that I broke down. One was, of course, when right before taking me to the roof, when he gave me that gun. And the second time that I publicly broke down was, again, like when I was telling you that news came. And I was like, do you guys not have enough information right now? Like, I gave you everything. There's my friends and family and everyone's coming out with evidence, right? Like, okay, fine, you don't believe my account. There's evidence now. What else do you want? Because there was a video, and for people who still think I am whatever I am, there's a video, and I don't know if it's on YouTube, but I'll try to get it on YouTube. If it's not there, there's a video actually which came out and which was pivotal in that case. Was they were taking us hostage. And one of the gunmen came and took us, like, made us stand up and get into the house where we were like ducking, and we were like, don't kill us. That's on video, and that was presented to court. And that was pivotal, because that's when a lot of people are like, all right, like, there's literally video evidence. Like, how, like, this is not staged. They're not here. They were there for a very, very particular mission, and they did all of that. I mean, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. I can't change what people think. But by this time there was enough evidence, and I broke down because I was like, what else do you need?
After a month and a half in Bangladesh interrogation and jail, you get cleared.
Oh no, jail was after that month and a half. Then I went to jail for another month and a half.
Wow. This was a 3-month ordeal.
This was, a 3-month ordeal.
That's insane.
Jail was definitely one of the most fascinating experiences of my life, especially jail in Bangladesh, right? There's a lot of like scary stories that surround jail, right? But I saw a lot of innocent people, and that's the case for any incarceral system anywhere. And I'll come to this topic, but I'm very passionate about healthcare inside prison systems, circumstances through which people go to prison, and of course, addiction within people who are in prisons. But jail was one of the most fascinating, eye-opening things because one, you see a lot of innocent people there, but two, you also see a lot of people who you know have done stuff, and they'll tell it to you openly, and them being normal to you. They'll say that I killed I had to kill 7 people, and I'm like, huh? All right. I met someone who was a paid hitman. So this guy comes up to me, and initially, like, I was under full lockdown. There was also, I had to go through like solitary as well initially. That was definitely very difficult for me because I'm an extroverted person and I need to talk to people. And solitary was like probably worse than a lot of other experiences in my life because I was like, what am I going to do? I'm bored. Like, at least give me a book.
Oh my gosh, that would be horrible.
Yeah, like it was so bad. And of course,
did you at least like do a bunch of push-ups and get jacked?
Like, how much? Like, at one point you're like, how many push-ups can I do? I'm bored right now. So people who go through solitary and like come out, like, they're mentally strong. I'm not that mentally strong. But eventually when they let me out of solitary, and like, so it was in phases. First I was in solitary, then they let me go out and just walk on the hallways in front of my cell. And then eventually I could go into the compound where my cell hold was. And then eventually I could go to the bigger compound where the whole facility was, right? With time. So when I was just like only able to access there. And by this time, I'm infamous, right? Everyone in the country knows about me. That's that guy from Canada. That's that guy. That's that guy who killed 21 people. So that's like cred inside. That's like cred. And a lot of them come and talk to me, and then they're like, "Oh, you sure?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm sure. I didn't do
theater
that."
Guy.
Yeah, it's like, "Are you sure you killed 21 people?" So I was like, "Yeah, no shit, I did it." And I'm just a kid who was, who just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time.
That is wild.
So this guy, probably like my age, a few years older than me, 25 maybe. I don't know. He looked pretty young. He might have been older. And we were talking, and then he gave me like, he had some extra food in his, I think he was from a different cell block, but he was there. And he gave me like, he had like some biscuits or some cookies. And he was like, "Do you want to have some?" I was like, "Sure, yeah, why not? Someone's being kind to me. Nice, I'll take it." So I have a conversation with him, and he used to go to like college and this university. And then eventually, I'm like, then of course, like everyone asks, "What are you in here for?" Right? And I asked him like, "What are you in here for?" He's like, "Yeah, and this time I'm in because there was, I recently killed someone and it got caught." And I was like, "Oh, so you've been here before?" And he's like, "Yeah, like I've been in and out a couple of times." And I'm like, "Oh, what do you do?" It's like, I'm like, you can say like I'm sort of like a hitman. Like, I just, when there's a job, I do it. And then when there isn't, I do other things, like I hustle and do other stuff. I'm like, it's job. He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Nice.
That
it
is
was
wild.
Great meeting you. Like, you're amazing. You're a great person. Like, yeah, I need to go to the bathroom." Like, I will not cross this guy even once. He can like take my life out.
That's wild.
So, like you have these very fascinating interactions in jail, but eventually like that came to an end. I got out on bail. And then I was stuck in Bangladesh for another year with my legal battle. And of course my, when you're in a legal battle, you can't travel. So eventually I stayed back in Bangladesh. I was working for the FAO, which is a UN organization, Food and Agriculture Organization. So
what's it stand for?
FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, and we work with One Health, which does basically disease surveillance for veterinary animals, but they also work on antimicrobial resistance also in humans. So I was kind of doing the work that I love. Like I was going to go work with UNICEF, and I was working with FAO, another UN organization, in public health. So that was amazing. But I was always in fear because when I was working, sometimes I'd go out for lunch and I'd have lunch alone by myself. And this is not within the compound. This is like out in the streets. And I'd eat and I'd look around me and I'd be like, oh shit, is someone going to recognize me? Is someone going to recognize me? Because by this time, like my face was plastered all over the news. But eventually I came to the realization that, yeah, people also have short-term memory. So even if they see you, they don't realize who you are. If you tell them, then they're like, I know you. But of course, I didn't go ahead and tell people. So we finished that court battle. It was a lot for my family to go through. But then I got acquitted. And, with a lot of help from the Canadian government and my friends and family, who actually started a movement while I was inside. It was called #FreeTahmid. Yeah. This was while I was in interrogation, actually. And like my friends and family from all over Canada, US, like where globally, and there was a hashtag which was trending at the time. And then eventually I got back to Canada and I go back to University of Toronto. And when I start doing classes, I'm like, this is probably more difficult than all of that. Because that is a really tough school. University of Toronto is a difficult school, and exam season at University of Toronto is probably more traumatic than a lot of my experiences.
That's crazy.
It's how you contextualize, right?
But I'm sure you had to go into shedding the trauma.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm curious, through your experience, if people have these big events in their life that they've gone through, and these traumas, as a lot of us do, what advice do you have for people to shed trauma?
And I think I've talked to a lot of people as well who've had, I guess, pretty traumatic experiences. And what your counselor or whoever you're seeking mental health help from, whether it be through a counselor or some kind of doula, or like whatever the form of outlet may be. Again, it's about you being able to talk in a safe space and that other person helping you contextualize. It is better when you do it with a trained professional because they give you certain techniques you can use to deal with that trauma. There's medications for it. I study addiction sciences, and there's some experimental therapies going on right now using ketamine for PTSD. So there's different ways to deal with it, right? But for me, and I guess I can give it as advice for someone else since I've been through something that's at least somewhat traumatic.
Come on, man.
Traumatic, okay. So
very traumatic.
Very traumatic. Right. I always gained a lot out of sharing. And I think for a lot of people, they might not be comfortable sharing with as many people. Just even having this conversation for me, I feel relief. This was my monthly let it out. And, when you let it out, it also recontextualizes your life. Because as I'm letting it out, I realize that all of that's in the past and it doesn't affect me. There are scars, there are wounds. But if I can have normal moments in my day-to-day, then I think I can manage those instances when PTSD comes in, right? And yesterday I was on a flight back from my work, which I'm doing in Richmond right now. And I was reading the DSM-5. DSM-5 is like basically the categorization, the manual for categorizing mental health disorders and substance use disorders. And I was reading, and I took a little bit of interest because I knew I was going to talk today into reading what PTSD is defined as. And as post-traumatic stress disorder is something that physically alters your brain. It's a stress response which manifests in behavioral outlets, but it is because that stress, those stressors physically alter your brain, just like addiction. So a lot of these mental health manifestations become physical alterations of your brain. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because if there are physical alterations to your brain, but you're able to deal with it at certain times in a way that's constructive, one, there should be, of course, mainstream treatment for these physical alterations which help you manage that. But you also have defined certain regimens or practices that help you normalize it. So if you try to enhance those practices or those moments or those emotions, however or whatever that may be, then there you have your outlet of managing something as traumatic, something which manifests as PTSD. So I think for me, the trauma response was, of course, there's depression. Like I have episodes all the time. I have PTSD, and the triggers aren't always the same. Like someone would think that me talking about it would trigger me. No, it wouldn't. But I would hear a sound, or I would see a certain color of light, which would remind me of what that room looked like that night. And then that would trigger PTSD, or someone would say something which I heard that night, and then that would trigger my PTSD. Or I would read those YouTube comments, and that triggers my PTSD. But I know how to get back, right? Because then I think about the people, and I think about the positive experiences, and I think about how I regiment my life and how I live my day-to-day, and that brings me back. And I communicate with the people that I'm comfortable with, that I'm going through something. Or even if I can't always open up and say that I'm going through something, I would share something which relieves me of that stress that's built up. And when I feel comfortable speaking to someone, I feel like there's an ease to whatever stressor was aggregating. So that's my 2 cents on how someone can deal with PTSD. And this is not medically approved. This is not approved by the FDA. So this is not replicable. And I can't prescribe it. But, if you're going through certain issues in your life, try to rationalize it, try to compartmentalize it, and try to hold on to positive moments that generally give you relief, because those positive moments can help you out of a certain situation. Mental health is complex. And I always advocate, for physical therapy, for mental health counseling and medication. And of course, a support system if you have one. Mm-hmm. Because I think having that support system, friends and family and people around you neighbors, I don't know, whoever is a colleague who you feel comfortable with, that support system is very important. Mm-hmm. And go back to them.
Thank you for that, Tahmid. Through all of those experiences, being held hostage, going into interrogation, going into jail, how do you feel like those have shaped you into who you are today?
It's a good question. Like I don't reflect on that a lot or enough. But I think what those experiences have given me is, one, a motivation, right? It's given me a motivation to do better, constantly strive to be better. Sometimes that manifests in being competitive at work or school. A lot of times that makes you just want to chill and just spend my day doing nothing, because I'm like, I deserve it. I've been through everything. I've seen everything. I just deserve some rest. And my old roommate used to always say, you have to value rest. You have to value rest. Well, most of the time, how it shapes me is trying to do good for other people. And maybe I can tell you a little bit about my nonprofit, because I think
please,
a culmination of my experiences or what I've gone through has come in the form of 2 things. One is the research and the work that I do on addiction sciences, because I've suffered from addiction issues myself. So researching and understanding that and making people understand what addiction is. Mm-hmm. And secondly, the work which I have done with my nonprofit. I co-founded this nonprofit. Basically, we strung together efforts from expatriates during COVID-19 in Bangladesh while we were in Canada. And what that had led to during the pandemic was a lot of individuals starting their own initiatives. And there were initiatives which, focused on healthcare. Some had communication initiatives. And this happened through, the efforts manifested through a hashtag, ironically enough. And what eventually happened has been what started in 2020 has resulted or set the foundation for us forming our nonprofit in 2023. It's called BL. BL stands for Bachar Larai, which in Bangla means strive to survive. And our work focuses on three things. It's community building, it is policy research, and it's signature initiatives. And I guess how we operate is, or what the core value of it is right now, is empowering Bangladeshis worldwide. And it's honestly been a pleasure. Like when you have a full-time job and then you have a nonprofit on the side and you're trying to make music on the few other hours that you have left in that week. But when you're, when you're finishing work and you're spending these hours working on your nonprofit, a lot of what drives me and the people who are working with me on that organization, my co-founders, is what we do. I work on the communication side of things because I think I've said that enough in this whole conversation. I work on the communication side of things because I think trying to communicate the work that we do is just as important as the work that we do, because people need to internalize what's being done. And the more we can communicate that work, the more it lays the foundation for more better work to be done. And what has happened as a result, and a lot of the co-founders who I started it are some of my best friends and my loved ones and my brother.
That's very special.
It is very special. And I get to constantly talk to them and I get to argue with them. And then we're like, all right, we got to refocus. We've done a lot of menstrual health work. Now let's, work on climate change. And it gives me that freedom to a lot of times to do good, in a platform that's my own. And maybe that's not what's giving me the roof above my head. Someday I hope it will. But it just lets me do good in a way sometimes I can decide. And it helps me set the basis of those interactions that I'll probably remember on my deathbed. And there are very few things which give you happiness than those positive moments, like when we finish a project. And, we work with a lot of grassroots organizations, whether that be in Canada, America, or in Bangladesh, and hopefully globally soon. But when you finish a project and, like you're working here and you're like not on the ground, right? But when they send those photos and you see those people, like sometimes they're smiling, sometimes they're like, why the hell are you taking my photo? But when you see people actually being impacted by hours that you're putting in, there is, and you can probably relate to this, there is no better feeling in that world. And rush, people, when some people make a good deal on the stock market, the kind of rush they have, or when I work in PR, when you get a story, the rush that you get a rush when you see that people have been impacted and you see someone smile, or you see someone, have grocery for the rest of the day, or you see someone get an eye operation. That's the rush that I want to keep on feeling. And that's the rush that I want to communicate to people. That those interactions are what forms the human experience. And I think the human experience is something that makes our species different from a lot of other organisms in this cesspool of life.
Tahmid, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
I'm so glad that we met in an elevator, man.
I think sidebar, Andrew and I met at an elevator at Soho House, New York.
In an elevator, we literally had an elevator ride down from the 6th floor to the ground floor.
Right.
And somebody in the elevator was like, well, this guy's been held hostage. And I was like, wait a minute, what? And brother, like, I know we went deep tonight, man.
Right,
and I just want to thank you for being open about your story. I'm so impressed with you as a human being, how kind you are, how motivated you are, how thoughtful. You're very thoughtful. The fact that you read up on PTSD last night to help share that just shows how much you care about improving the lives of others. Yeah. And that's the goal of this podcast, Permission to Shine.
Exactly.
Is to give us a front row seat to these extraordinary people and experiences.
Did you just call me extraordinary?
I did.
I love you.
I did, man. You are extraordinary for what you've gone through and how you're using that as an agent of change for positive action in the world. Mm-hmm. It's inspiring, man. And I feel really lucky to have highlighted your story And so thank you for giving us a front row seat to it. And I can't wait to continue to follow your journey with BL, with your music, with your addiction research. Check out the TED Talk for everyone who wants to listen to that at the University of Toronto.
University of Toronto.
You gave it at. So check that out as well. And I'll just leave it as thank you, brother.
Thank you so much, Andrew. This was inspiring. This was humbling. And I think a lot of the people that I saw who've come here have inspired and humbled me. And thank you for giving me the platform and the permission to shine.
My pleasure, man. Anytime. Thank you, Tahmid.